Hello everyone, and welcome back to another session of me reading The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, this session we have entered chapter 11, which is actually quite a short chapter. It's only about 6 pages long, I believe. So this will be kind of a quick one, but the next chapter is actually really long, so I'm going to split it into 2 parts, so I don't want to kind of mess that up. So, as a start today, happy Monday. If you guys are watching with me, today is actually May the 4th, which is kind of unofficially Star Wars Day. So I'm breaking my fantasy genre for just a little bit, and I'm wearing my sci-fi genre shirt. So as a fun fact about me, I love Star Wars. I watched Star Wars for the first time when I was about 9 or 10 years old, so about like 4th or 5th grade. My mom borrowed some tapes from a friend of ours who had taped it on TV. That's kind of outside your guys' knowledge, but that's okay. My favorite Star Wars movie is Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, which is quite a popular movie. It's considered to be one of the better Star Wars movies. And then lastly, some of you already know this about me, but I am a huge fan of the original movies, 4, 5, and 6, and then I really like the prequels, so 1, 2, and 3, but I am not a fan of the newer movies, 7, 8, and 9. I actually didn't even go see 9 in the theater, so there's a fun fact about you. You may have even heard me rant about Star Wars, and if you haven't, don't bring it up because you'll have to hear so much, and it's just awful, trust me. All right, so let's jump right into chapter 11. As a recap, in chapter 10, Thorin made his presence known to the people at Lake Town. There was kind of a prophecy, maybe more of a hoping of the Lake Town people that eventually the dwarves would come back and reclaim their home from the dragon, if there was a dragon. Now remember, Thorin is over 100 years old. Dwarves live quite a bit longer than men, and so in the town of Lake Town, they're kind of like, there might have been a dragon, but who knows? Because nobody's seen him since the dwarves left the mountain. But I think they secretly hope that somebody will come and reclaim at least the town of Dale, or maybe even try to go back into the mountain, because Lake Town and Dale used to flourish back when the dwarves lived in the mountain. So I think that they're more optimistic than they really believe in a dragon, that the dwarves will eventually come back and reclaim their homeland, and that riches will flow from the mountain once more. So Thorin made his presence known in Lake Town, and the men there gave them supplies. They let them refuel. So it's been about a week or 2, and they're back to their full strength. And now they're about to enter the last and most dangerous leg of the journey, the dragon. All right. So we are going to do a very short chapter today. It is chapter 11, and it is titled On the Doorstep. In 2 days going, they rode right up the long lake and passed into the river running. And now they could see the lonely mountain, towering grim and tall before them. The stream was strong, and their going was slow. At the end of the 3rd day, some miles up the river, they drew into the left or western bank and disembarked. Here they were joined by the horses and the other provisions that were necessary, and the ponies for their own use that had been sent to meet them. They packed what they could on the ponies, and the rest was made into a store under a tent. But none of the men of the town would stay with them, even for the night, so near to the shadow of the lonely mountain. Not at any rate until the songs have come true, they said. It was easier to believe in the dragon, and less easy to believe in Thorin in these wild parts. Indeed, their stores had no need of any guard, for all the land was desolate and empty. So their escort left them, making off swiftly down the river and shoreward towards the path, although the night was already drawing on. Now, just as a recap, we talked about where the Lonely Mountain sits. So I'm going to kind of show you on this map. So there, the Lonely Mountain, it sits not just because it's a solitary mountain, but because it is by itself. As you see, Mirkwood ends over here, and the Long Lake is down here. So the company is going north to the Lonely Mountain, and it's like, it is really the only thing that stands out there. There isn't civilization. Besides Dale, which doesn't stand anymore, that was the only town that was close enough to it. So they really are kind of out in the middle of nowhere. They spent a cold and lonely night, and their spirits fell. The next day they set out again. Balin and Bilbo rode behind, each leading another pony heavily laden beside them. The others were some way ahead, picking out a slow road, for there were no paths. They made northwest, slanting away from the river running, and drawing ever nearer and nearer to a great spur in the mountain that was flung out southward towards them. It was a weary journey, and a quiet and stealthy one. There was no laughter or songs or sounds of harps, or the pride and the hopes that had stirred in their hearts at the singing of old songs by the lake, which had died away to a plodding gloom. They knew that they were drawing near to the end of their journey, and that it might be a very horrible end. The land about them grew bleak and barren, though once, as Thorin told him, it had been green and fair. There was little grass, and before long there was neither bush nor tree, and only the broken and blackened stumps to speak of the long ones vanished. They were coming to the desolation of the dragon, and they were coming to the waning of the year. So if you guys remember, they're trying to find when Durin's day is, and they don't really know when it is. That's when the path will alight. It's somewhere in the autumn, so they're coming to the end of the day, or the end of the year. So it's kind of, winding down, and it's kind of setting the stage for the desolation of Smaug. They reached the skirts of the mountain, all the same, without meeting any danger or sign of the dragon, other than the wilderness he had made about his lair. The mountain lay dark and silent before them, and ever higher above them. They made their camp on the western side of the great southern spur, which ended in a height called Ravenhill. On there had been an old watch post, but they dare not climb it. It was too exposed. Before setting out to search the western spurs of the mountain for the hidden door, on which all their hopes rested, Thorin sent out a scouting expedition to spy the land of the south where the front gate stood. For this purpose they chose Balin, Keely, and Fili, and with them went Bilbo. They marched under the grey and silent cliffs to the feet of Ravenhill. There the river, winding a wide loop over the valley of Dale, turned towards the mountain on its road to the lake, flowing swift and noiselessly. Its bank was bare and rocky, tall and steep above the stream, and gazing out of it over the narrow water, foaming and splashing among the many boulders, they could see in the wide valley of the shadowed by the mountain's arms the gray ruins of ancient houses, towers and walls. There lies all that's left of Dale, said Balin. The mountain sides were green, and the woods and all the sheltered valleys rich and pleasant in the days when the bells rang out in the town. He looked both sad and grim as he said this. He had been one of Thorin's companions the day the dragon had come. They did not dare to follow the river much further towards the gate, but they went on beyond the end of the southern spur until, lying hidden behind a rock, they could look out and see the dark cavernous opening of the great cliff walls between the arms of the mountain. Out of the water of the running river sprang, and out of it there came a steam and a dark smoke. Nothing moved in the waste, save the vapor in the water, and every now and again a black and ominous crow. The only sound was the sound of the stony water, and every now and then the harsh croak of a bird. Balin shuddered. "Let us return," he said. "We can do no good here, and I don't like these dark birds. They look like the spies of evil." "The dragon is still alive, and the hall under the mountain, then, or so I imagine so from the smoke," said Hobbit. "That does not prove it," said Balin. "Although I don't doubt you are right, but he might be gone away for some time, or he might be lying on the mountainside keeping watch, and I still expect smoke and steam would come out of the gates. All the halls must be filled with his foul reek." Sorry guys, I think my camera's going a little bit back and forth here. Let's see. That's slightly better. Sorry if the picture kind of moves back and forth. I'm using my phone to record all of these because I don't have any fancy equipment. So if things look kind of weird, I guess just deal with it. With such gloomy thoughts, followed ever by croaking crows above them, they made their way wearily back to the camp. Only in June they had been guests in the fair house of Elrond, and now, though autumn was now crawling towards winter, that pleasant time seemed years ago. They were alone in the perilous waste, without hope or help. They were at the end of their journey, but as far as ever, it seemed, from the end of their quest. None of them had much spirits left. Now, strange to say, Mr. Baggins had more than the others. He would often borrow Thorin's map and gaze at it, pondering over the runes and the messages of the moon letters Elrond had read. It was he that made the dwarves begin the dangerous search for on the western slopes for the secret door. They moved their camp to the long valley, narrower than the great dale in the south of where the gates of the river stood, and walled with the lower spurs of the mountain. Two of these here thrust forward from the west of the main mass in the long, steep-sided ridges that fell ever downward towards the plain. On this western side there were fewer signs of the dragon's marauding feet, and there was some grass for the ponies. From this western camp, shadowed all day by cliff, and walled until the sun began to sink towards the forest, day by day they toiled in parties, searching for paths high up the mountainside. If the map was true, somewhere high above the cliff's valley's head must stand the secret door. Day by day, they came back to the camp without success. But at last, unexpectedly, they found what they were seeking. Fili and Kili and the Hobbit went back one day down the valley and scrambled among the tumbled rocks at the southern corner. About midday, creeping behind a great stone that stood alone like a pillar, Bilbo came on what looked like a rough step going upward. Following these excitedly, he and the dwarves found traces of a narrow track, often lost, often rediscovered, that wandered to the top of the southern ridge and brought them at last to a still narrower ledge, which turned north across the face of the mountain. Looking down, they saw that they were at the top of the cliff at the valley's head and were gazing down at their own camp below. Silently, clinging to the rocky wall on the right, they went in single file along the ledge until the wall opened and they turned into a steep-walled bay, grassy floored, still and quiet. Its entrance, which they had found, could not be seen from below because of the overhang of the cliff, nor from further off because it was so small that it looked like a dark crack and nothing more. It was not a cave and was open to the sky above, but at its inner end a flat wall rose up into the lower part, close to the ground, was smooth and as upright as mason's work, but without a joint or crevice to be seen. There was no sign of post or lintel or threshold, nor any of the bar or bolt or keyhole, yet they did not doubt that they had found the door at last. They beat on it, they thrust and they pushed, they implored it to move, they spoke fragments of broken spells of opening, and nothing stirred. At last, tired, they rested in the grass at their feet, and then at evening began the long climb down. Now, as I think I've mentioned to you once before, this is a secret door. It's a hidden door. It's a dwarven door. And if you guys have seen Lord of the Rings, it's kind of like the door in Moria, where there's going to be a way to open it, but it's secret. Dwarves are very private, very secretive. They make all these like fancy ways to close their doors. There was excitement in the camp that night. In the morning they prepared to move at once. Only Bofer and Bomber were left behind to guard the ponies and such stores as they had brought up from the river. The others went down to the valley, up to the newly found path, and so to the narrow ledge. Along this they could carry no bundles or packs, so narrow and breathless as it was, with a fall of 100 feet beside them onto sharp rocks below. But each of them took a good coil of rope and wound it about their waist. So at last, without mishap, they reached the grassy bay. There they made their third camp, hauling up what they could need from below with their ropes. Down the same way, they were able to occasionally lower one of the more active dwarves, such as Kili, to exchange such news as there was, or to take a share in the guard below where Bofer was hauled up to the higher camp. Bomber would not come up either rope nor path. "I am too fat for such flyaways," he said. "I should turn a dizzy and tread on my beard, and then you would be 13 again." And he knotted the rope, and the knotted ropes are too slender for my weight. Lucky for him this was not true, as you will see. In the meanwhile, some of them explored the ledge beyond the opening and found a path that led higher and higher on the mountain. But they did not dare to venture very far that way, nor was there much use in it. Out there, the silence reigned, broken by no bird or sound except the call of the wind in the cranny's stone. They spoke low and never called or sang, for danger rooted in every rock. The others who were busy with the secret of the door had no more success. They were too eager to be troubled about the runes or the moon letters, but tried without resting to discover where exactly the smooth face of the rock of the door was hidden. They had brought picks and tools and all of many sorts from Lake Town, and at first they tried to use these, but when they struck the stone, the handles splintered and jarred in their arms cruelly, and the steel heads broke or bent like lead. Mining work, they saw clearly, was no good against the magic that had shut the door, and they grew terrified, too, of the echoing noise. So I have one picture here that I'd like to show you guys. So that's supposed to be the front gate. So if you can see, there's the river, there's the tree, the front of opening of the cave, which has smoke billowing from it. And you can see it doesn't really show Smaug's destruction, but it does show like the empty stump in the tree that's been charred. So you can definitely tell that nothing's growing there because there's a dragon living. Bilbo found, sitting on the doorstep, lonely and wearisome. There was not a doorstep, of course, really, but they used to call the little grassy space between the wall and the opening the doorstep in fun, remembering Bilbo's words long ago at the unexpected party in his hobbit hole, when he said they could sit on the doorstep till they thought about something. And sit they did, thinking about or wandering aimlessly about, and glummer they'd become. Their spirits had risen a little at the discovery of the path, but now they sank into their boots, and yet they would not give up and go away. The hobbit was no longer brighter than the dwarves. He would do nothing but sit on his back to the rock face and stare away at the west through the opening, over the cliffs, over the wide lands to the black wall of Mirkwood, and then to the distances beyond, in which he sometimes thought he could catch glimpses of the misty mountains, fallen small and far. If the dwarves had asked him what he was doing, he answered, "You said sitting on the doorstep, and I'm thinking would be my job, not to mention getting inside. So I am sitting and thinking." But I'm afraid he was not thinking much of the job, but of the land that lay beyond the blue distance, the quiet western land, and the hill, and his hobbit hole underneath. A large gray stone sat in the center of the grass, and he stared moodily at it and watched the great snails. They seemed to love the little shut-in bay with its walls of cool rock, and there were many of them of huge size, crawling slowly and stickily among the sides. "Tomorrow begins the last week of autumn," Thorin said one day. "And winter comes after autumn," said Bifur. "And next year after that," said Dwalin, "and our beards will still grow longer as they hang down the cliff to the valley before anything happens here. What is our burglar doing for us? Since he has got an invisible ring and ought to be especially excellent performer now, I'm beginning to think he might just go through the front gate and spy on it a bit." Bilbo heard this, and the dwarfs were on the rock just above the enclosure where he was sitting, and said, "Good gracious," he thought. "So that's what they are beginning to think, is it? It's always poor me that has to get them out of their difficulties, at least since the wizard left. Whatever am I going to do? I might have known that something dreadful would happen to me in the end. I don't think I could bear to see the unhappy valley of Dale again. And as for that steaming gate..." At night he was very miserable and hardly slept. The next day the dwarves went all wandering off in various directions, some exercising the ponies down below, and some were roving about the mountainside. All day Bilbo sat gloomily in the bay, gazing at the stone, or out west, at the narrow opening. He had a queer feeling that he was waiting for something. Perhaps the wizard will suddenly come back today, he thought. As he lifted his head, he could see a glimpse of a distant forest, as the sun turned west and caught a gleam of yellow upon the far roof, as if the light had caught the last pale leaves. Soon he saw an orange ball of the sun sinking towards the level of his eye. He went to the opening, and there, a pale and faint, was a thin new moon above the rim of the earth. At that very moment he heard a sharp crack behind him. There on the gray stone in the grass was an enormous thrush, nearly coal-black, and its pale yellow breast freckled with dark spots. Crack! It had caught a snail and was knocking against the stone. Crack, crack! Suddenly Bilbo understood. Forgetting all danger, he stood on the ledge and hailed the dwarves, shouting and waving. Those that were nearest came tumbling over the rocks, and as fast as they could, along the ledge to him, wondering what on earth was the matter. All the others shouted to be hauled up the ropes, except Bombur, of course. He was asleep. Quickly Bilbo explained. They all fell silent, the hobbit standing by the grey stone, and the dwarves with wagging beards watching impatiently. The sun sank lower and lower, and their hopes fell. It sank into a belt of deep reddened cloud and almost disappeared. The dwarves groaned, but Bilbo stood without moving. The little moon was dipped into the horizon. Evening was coming on, and then suddenly when their hope was at a lowest, red ray of the sun escaped like a finger through a rent in the cloud. A gleam of light came straight through the opening into the bay and fell upon the smooth rock. The old thrush, who had been watching from a high perch with beady eyes and head cocked to one side, gave a sudden trill. There was a loud crack. A flake of rock split from the wall and fell. A hole quickly appeared, suddenly about 3 feet from the ground. Quickly, trembling lest the chance should fade, the dwarves rushed to the rock and pushed in vain. The key! The key! Cried Bilbo. Where is Thorin? Thorin hurried up. The key, shouted Bilbo. The key went with the map. Try it now while there's still time. Then Thorin stepped and drew the key on its chain from around his neck. He put it in the hole. It fitted and it turned. Snap. The gleam went out and the sun sank and the moon was gone and the evening sprang into the sky. Now they all pushed together and slowly a part of the rock wall gave way. Long, straight cracks appeared and widened. A door 5 feet high and 3 feet broad was outlined and slowly, without a sound, swung inwards. It seemed as if the mountain flowed out like a vapor from the hole, and in the mountainside, the deep darkness in which nothing could be seen lay before their eyes, a yawning mouth leading in and down. All right. So I know we're kind of, I'm going to make a bad pun. We're a cliffhanger right now. But I'm going to stop there because, like I said, the next chapter is quite a bit longer, and I'm going to split it into 2 sections. So they have found the entrance to the gate. They have found Durin's Day, which, as Thorin said here, tomorrow begins the last week of autumn. So Durin's Day must be on the day that starts the last week of autumn. So the magic has kind of shown them a path. So they've got the key in, the door's open, and I think they're going to find out what happens after this. So I hope you guys join me next time for chapter 12, part 1. I'm very excited. I know that it seems like we've been reading this forever, but if you guys look, we are in this section. There are 19 chapters in this book, and we are now on chapter 12, and chapter 12 is the longest of them. So chapter 12 is almost 20 pages, but all the rest of them are between 7 and 9 pages. So we're going to be done before we know it. I'm so excited. So I hope you guys have a fantastic week, and I will see you next time.